The Iron Lantern was less a bar and more a collection of shadows that happened to serve whiskey. It smelled of old wood, spilled beer that had seeped into the grain of the floorboards, and the faint, clean scent of the polished mason used on the bar top every night before closing. For 2 years, this had been my sanctuary. A place where my particular brand of loneliness could sit in a corner booth, nurse a single drink for 2 hours, and feel, if not seen, then at least acknowledged. A ghost with a tab. And the center of this quiet, dim universe was Mason. He was the bartender, the owner, the steady, grounding presence that kept the place from floating away on a sea of cheap liquor and quiet desperation. I had, from my very first night here, cataloged him with the obsessive detail of a man starved for beauty. The way his dark hair fell over his brow when he was concentrating on a complex cocktail for one of the rare tourists who wandered in. The set of his jaw, firm and resolute. The network of fine lines around his eyes that crinkled when he offered one of his infrequent, small smiles. He moved with an economy of motion that was mesmerizing, never a wasted step, never a fumbled glass. He was a pillar of quiet competence in a world that felt increasingly chaotic and loud. And, as far as I knew, he was completely, unshakably straight. I had no concrete evidence for this assumption, only the absence of any evidence to the contrary. He never flirted with the men who came in, but he also never flirted with the women. He treated everyone with the same level, professional courtesy. He was a blank slate onto which I had projected 1,000 hopeless narratives. Mason, the stoic bartender who would one day meet a nice, normal girl and move to the suburbs. Mason, the guy who was probably just being friendly when his fingers brushed mine as he took my empty glass. Mason, the man who had no idea that the quiet writer in the corner booth had mapped out every line on his forearms, the exact shade of his eyes in the low light, the cadence of his low voice when he'd say, "Same again, Leo?" That question was often the only one I answered aloud all day. My life was a cycle of solitude. I worked from home, wrestling words onto a page for clients who paid me to be invisible, to adopt their voice. I lived alone in a small apartment that was neat, tidy, and silent. The Iron Lantern was my only tether to the world of ambient human noise. The low murmur of conversation, the clink of ice, the distant traffic, it was the soundtrack that proved I still existed. Tonight, the world outside was staging a drama of its own. A summer storm had been threatening all day, the air thick and heavy with unspoken electricity. Now, it had finally broken. Rain hammered against the windows of the bar, thick sheets of it that blurred the streetlights into watercolor smudges. Thunder rumbled in the distance, a low growl that vibrated through the floor. It was a Tuesday, so the bar was already slow. The storm had chased out all but the most dedicated drinkers. A couple of old-timers at the far end of the bar, a young woman scrolling on her phone, and me. And Mason. He was polishing glasses, holding them up to the dim light to check for smudges. The motion was familiar, hypnotic. His sleeves were rolled up to his elbows, revealing those forearms I knew so well. Strong, dusted with dark hair, a roadmap of faint scars and prominent veins. I watched the play of muscle as he worked, the methodical circular motion of the cloth in his hand. My chest felt tight, a familiar ache of yearning that had become a permanent resident in my ribs. It was a foolish, pointless crush, the kind a teenager has on a movie star. Distant, safe, and utterly impossible. He caught me looking. It was a moment that had happened 100 times before. My eyes would drift, get caught, and I would quickly look down at my drink, a hot flush of embarrassment creeping up my neck. But tonight was different. Tonight, he didn't just glance away. He held my gaze for a beat longer than usual, his hands stilled on the glass. The air between us, already charged by the storm, seemed to crackle with something new. His expression was unreadable, as always, but his eyes, for just a second, seemed to be asking a question. I didn't know the answer. I didn't even know the question. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. I was the one who broke the contact. My gaze dropping to the condensation ring my glass was leaving on the dark wood of my table. My hands felt clammy. It was nothing. It was just a look. I was a writer. My job was to invent meaning where there was none. I was reading too much into it, as always. Another one, Leo? His voice cut through my internal spiral. It was low, calm, the same as always. I looked up. He was already reaching for the bottle of my usual whiskey, the amber liquid catching the light. The moment had passed. The air settled back into its usual shape. I was just a customer again. Please, I managed, my own voice sounding thin and reedy to my ears. He brought the drink over, setting it down on a fresh coaster. This was another one of the small, unspoken kindnesses. He never made me come to the bar. He always brought my drinks to my booth. It was a small thing, but in my quiet life, small things grew to enormous proportions. As he set the glass down, the back of his hand brushed against mine. It was a whisper of a touch, skin on skin, lasting no more than a second. But it sent a jolt through my entire system, a shock of warmth that spread from my hand all the way up my arm. I snatched my hand back as if I'd been burned. He didn't react. He just straightened up, his gaze sweeping the room. "Nasty night," he said, his eyes on the rain-streaked windows. "Yeah," I said, my throat dry. I took a sip of the whiskey, the burn a welcome distraction. "It is." He lingered for a moment, his presence a solid weight beside my table. I could smell his scent, not cologne, nothing so deliberate. It was just him. Soap, clean cotton, and that faint, underlying scent of the bar itself, whiskey and wood smoke and rain. It was the smell of this place, the smell of my hopeless infatuation. Then he moved away, back to the safety of his bar, and I was left alone with the storm inside my chest, a storm that was starting to feel even more powerful than the one raging outside. The night was far from over. I tried to lose myself in the rhythm of the bar again, to retreat into my comfortable role as a silent observer. I watched the old-timers, their heads bent close together, their conversation a low, continuous mumble. I watched the young woman, the blue light of her phone illuminating her face, making her look like a lonely apparition. I tried to focus on anything but Mason. But it was impossible. He was a magnet, and my attention was a field of iron filings, helplessly drawn to him. Every small gesture became an object of intense scrutiny. The way he leaned against the back counter, one foot crossed over the other, his arms folded over his chest. He was watching the storm, his profile outlined against the murky light from the window. He looked pensive, almost melancholy. I wondered what he was thinking about. Did he have someone waiting for him at home? A wife? A girlfriend? The thought sent a familiar, bitter pang through me. Of course he did. A man like him wouldn't be alone. A particularly loud clap of thunder shook the entire building, making the glasses behind the bar rattle. The lights flickered once, twice, and then died completely. The bar was plunged into an abrupt, shocking darkness. The only light came from the woman's phone and the faint, ghostly glow of the emergency exit sign over the door. A collective gasp went through the room. The woman's phone screen went dark as she looked up, startled. For a moment, there was only the sound of the rain and our own breathing. "Stay calm, everyone." Mason's voice came out of the blackness, steady and reassuring. "Just a power outage. I've got candles." I heard the sound of him moving, a soft scuff of shoes on the floor, the rustle of him searching for something behind the bar. A few seconds later, a small flame flickered to life. He lit a candle, its warm glow pushing back the oppressive darkness. He used it to light another, and then another. Soon, a small constellation of candles was spread out along the bar, casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. The atmosphere in the room shifted. The darkness and the candlelight made everything feel more intimate, more hushed. The old-timers had stopped talking. The woman had put her phone away. We were all just sitting in the quiet, watching the flames. Mason moved through the room, placing a candle on each occupied table. He set one down on mine, his large, capable hands cupping the flame protectively. The golden light illuminated his face from below, carving his features into sharp relief. He looked like a figure from an old painting, stoic and timeless. "You okay?" he asked, his voice softer than usual. I nodded, unable to speak. His proximity was overwhelming in the sudden intimacy of the dark. He was so close I could feel the warmth radiating from his body. I could see the individual flecks of gold in his brown eyes. "Good." He gave a small nod and moved on. The power outage seemed to be the final straw for the other patrons. The young woman stood up, her silhouette stark against the candlelight. "I think I'm going to try and make a break for it," she said to Mason. "You sure?" "It's coming down hard," he said, his tone laced with concern. "I'm not far. I'll be fine." He walked her to the door, holding it open as she dashed out into the deluge. A gust of wind and rain blew into the bar, making the candle flames dance wildly. He shut the door firmly against the storm. The two old-timers followed suit a few minutes later, grumbling about the weather. Mason saw them out as well, with a quiet, "Take care, fellas." And then it was just us. Just me, in my corner booth, and Mason, standing behind his bar, surrounded by the soft glow of a dozen candles. The only sounds were the relentless drumming of the rain and the quiet crackle of the wicks. The silence that fell between us was different from the usual comfortable quiet of the bar. It was heavy, thick with unspoken things. It felt fragile, like a soap bubble that the slightest word could pop. I should have left. I should have paid my tab and run out into the storm like everyone else. That would have been the sensible thing to do. The safe thing. Staying felt dangerous. It felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. But my legs felt like lead. I was rooted to the spot, held there by a force I couldn't name. Hope, maybe. Or perhaps just a deep, abiding foolishness. Mason began to move around the bar, his movements slow and deliberate. He collected the empty glasses from the other tables, wiped them down, and stacked them neatly. He was going through the motions of closing up, even though it was only 10 o'clock. My heart sank. This was it. He was going to kick me out. The fragile moment was over. I started to gather my things, my hands fumbling with my wallet. I pulled out a 20 and laid it on the table. My hands were shaking slightly. He finished his tidying and walked towards the front of the bar, towards the door. I watched his back, the broadness of his shoulders under his dark t-shirt. He didn't turn on any more lights. He just stood at the door for a moment, looking out through the rain-streaked glass. Then, he did something that made my breath catch in my throat. He reached up and killed the main lights, the ones that were on a separate circuit and had stayed on. The bar was plunged into near total darkness again, save for the candles and the red glow of the exit sign. My heart picked up its pace, thudding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I heard a sound, a solid, definitive sound, the heavy thud of a deadbolt sliding into place. He locked the door. He turned around, a tall, dark silhouette against the faint light from the street. I couldn't see his expression. I couldn't see anything but his shape. He stood there for a long moment, the silence stretching taut between us. Then, his voice came out of the darkness, low and steady, a simple statement that shattered my entire world. "Stay here." The words hang in the air. Stay here. It's not a question. It's a quiet command, a soft instruction that lands in the center of my chest with the force of a physical blow. My mind races, trying to catch up, to process the two simple words. There must be a reason. A practical, logical reason. The storm. The power outage. It's too dangerous to go out. He's just being a responsible bar owner, looking out for a regular. Yes, that's it. That has to be it. But my heart isn't listening to the frantic negotiations of my brain. My heart is screaming. It's a wild, terrifying, hopeful sound. He locked the door. He locked us in. Together. I am frozen in my booth, unable to move, unable to breathe. I watch his silhouette move away from the door, towards the bar. He picks up one of the candles, the flame casting flickering shadows across his face as he walks towards me. Each step he takes is deliberate, measured. The sound of his footsteps on the old wooden floor is the only sound in the world, louder than the rain, louder than the frantic drumming in my ears. He stops at my table. He doesn't sit, just stands there, looking down at me. The candlelight hollows out his cheeks, deepens the shadows under his eyes. His expression is still unreadable, a mask of calm neutrality. But his eyes are burning. They are fixed on me with an intensity that I have never seen from him before. It's a gaze that strips me bare, that sees right through the carefully constructed walls I've built around myself. "The storm's not letting up," he says. His voice is a low rumble, barely more than a whisper, but it fills the entire space. It's an explanation, a flimsy excuse that we both know is not the real reason. "No," I manage to say, my own voice a croak. "It's not." The silence descends again, but this time it's different. It's not empty. It's charged, humming with a high-voltage current of unspoken questions and terrifying possibilities. My mind is a frantic mess of what-ifs. What if I've misread everything? What if this is just kindness, and I'm turning it into something else in my desperate, lonely mind? The fear of humiliation is a cold knot in my stomach. To have my secret crush exposed, to be pitted, it would be unbearable. He sets the candle down on the table between us. The flame dances, reflecting in his dark eyes. He still hasn't moved. He's just watching me, waiting. But for what? For me to run? For me to say something? What could I possibly say? I feel a desperate need to fill the silence, to normalize the situation. You didn't have to do that, I say, gesturing vaguely towards the locked door. I would have been fine. I only live a few blocks away. A small, almost imperceptible smile touches the corner of his mouth. It's not his usual polite, professional smile. This one is different. It's knowing. I know, he says. And with those two words, all my carefully constructed logical explanations crumble into dust. He knows where I live. Of course he knows. I've been coming here for 2 years. But the way he says it, it's not just a statement of fact. It's an admission. He's not just looking out for a customer. This is something else. This is about me. My breath hitches. This is it. The precipice. I can either back away, pretend I don't understand, and retreat into the safety of my lonely existence. Or I can take a step forward, into the terrifying, unknown territory that he is offering me. His gaze drops from my eyes to my mouth. It's a fleeting, almost imperceptible shift, but I see it. I feel it like a physical touch. The air in my lungs seems to evaporate. The space between us shrinks, becomes charged and heavy. I can feel the heat of his body, even from a few feet away. I can smell the rain on his clothes from when he let the others out. He finally moves. He pulls out the chair opposite me, the scrape of its legs against the floor a shockingly loud sound in the quiet room. He sits down, leaning forward, his elbows on the table. We are now at eye level, the candle flame the only thing between us. Leo, he says my name, and the sound of it on his lips is different tonight. It's not the casual, friendly tone of a bartender. It's softer, more intimate. It feels like he's tasting it. Why do you come here every night? The question catches me off guard. It's so direct, so personal. I've never had a real conversation with him before. Just pleasantries. Small talk about the weather, about sports teams I don't follow. I've never told him anything real about myself. I like the quiet. I stammer, my default answer. He shakes his head slowly, his eyes never leaving mine. No, that's not it. This place isn't quiet. It's just low. There's a difference. He pauses, and his next words land with surgical precision. You come here to be alone, but not lonely. Am I right? I can only nod, my throat too tight to form words. He sees me. He actually sees me. He understands the subtle distinction that defines my entire existence. The need to be near the warmth of humanity without being touched by its flame. I get it, he says, his voice soft. I'm the same way. This is the first piece of himself he has ever offered me. A tiny crack in the stoic facade. Mason, the self-assured, competent man who seems so at ease in the world, feels the same way I do. The thought is both shocking and deeply comforting. You are, I whisper. I bought this place so I could be surrounded by people without having to really talk to any of them, he says, a wry, self-deprecating smile gracing his lips. Ironic for a bartender, I know. The shared confession hangs in the air between us, a fragile bridge built across the chasm of our silence. He's inviting me to cross it. The fear is still there, a cold current running beneath the surface, but something else is rising to meet it. A reckless, desperate courage. I have to know. I have to ask the question that has been burning a hole in my heart for 2 years. Mason, I begin, my voice trembling slightly. Why did you ask me to stay? He doesn't answer immediately. He just looks at me, his gaze searching my face, as if trying to gauge whether I'm ready for the answer. The candlelight flickers, throwing his expression into shadow and then into light. The silence stretches, each second an eternity. Then, he reaches across the table. His hand moves slowly, deliberately. I watch it mesmerized. It's a beautiful hand. Strong, calloused, yet gentle. He doesn't take my hand. He doesn't touch my arm. He just rests his fingers on the table, a few inches from mine. An invitation. My heart is a wild thing, beating against my ribs like it wants to escape. My hand is shaking, but I lift it. I close the small gap between us. My fingers brush against his. The contact is electric. A simple touch, skin on skin, but it feels like a lightning strike. His skin is warm, slightly rough. He doesn't pull away. He turns his hand over, his palm facing up. He is offering, not taking. I slide my hand into his. Our fingers lace together. It's a perfect fit. His hand is so much larger than mine, his grip firm and steady. It feels right. It feels like coming home. He looks down at our joined hands, then back up at my face. His eyes are dark, intense, and filled with an emotion I can't quite name. It's not pity. It's not curiosity. It's something deeper, something that mirrors the ache in my own chest. Because, he says, his voice a low, rough whisper that sends a shiver down my spine. I'm tired of being alone, too. And then he leans forward, closing the last few inches between us. His name is a silent prayer on my lips. Mason. The world narrows to this single point in time, to the space of a few inches between his mouth and mine. The air is thick, heavy with the scent of rain and wax and the clean, masculine scent that is uniquely him. My entire being is focused on the impending contact, a moment I have replayed in my imagination 1,000 times, but my most vivid fantasies pale in comparison to this terrifying, beautiful reality. His eyes are still open, locked with mine. In their depths, I see a reflection of my own fear, my own yearning. And I see something else, something that makes my breath catch. Vulnerability. The stoic, unreadable bartender is gone. In his place is just a man on the edge of the same precipice as me. The hand not holding mine comes up to cup my jaw. His thumb brushes gently against my cheek, the slight roughness of a callus sending a cascade of sparks across my skin. It's a gesture of such tenderness, such deliberate care, that it undoes me completely. The last of my fear dissolves, replaced by a wave of profound, aching relief. This is real. This is happening. My eyes flutter shut. I can't watch anymore. I can only feel. And then, his lips touch mine. It's not a hard, demanding kiss. It's soft, hesitant at first. A question. It's a gentle pressure, a testing of the waters. His lips are warm, firm, and they taste faintly of the whiskey he'd been sipping behind the bar. I exhale a shaky breath, a sound that is half sigh, half sob. I lean into him, my body instinctively seeking more. That is the answer he was waiting for. The pressure of his mouth increases, the kiss deepening. He shifts, his chair scraping against the floor as he moves closer. His other hand comes up to cradle the back of my neck, his fingers tangling in my hair. The gesture is possessive, grounding. He holds me as if he's afraid I might disappear. I am anything but gone. For the first time in my life, I feel completely, utterly present. I am here, in this dark, candlelit bar, with this man who I have wanted for so long it feels like a part of my own anatomy. My hands, which had been frozen in my lap, come up to rest on his chest. I can feel the solid, steady beat of his heart under my palm, a rhythm that is as strong and constant as he is. The kiss becomes something more. It's a conversation without words, a frantic, desperate exchange of all the things we couldn't say. 2 years of stolen glances, of unspoken longing, of quiet observation, all pouring out into this one, single point of contact. It's clumsy and urgent and perfect. The scrape of his stubble against my skin is a glorious, abrasive friction. The taste of him is intoxicating. He makes a low sound in the back of his throat, a rough groan of need that vibrates through my entire body. It's the most honest, unguarded sound I have ever heard from him, and it makes me bold. I part my lips, and he accepts the invitation immediately, his tongue sweeping into my mouth. The world tilts on its axis. The kiss is no longer gentle. It's hungry, ravenous. It's the kiss of a man who has been starving. And I am just as hungry. I meet his intensity with my own, my hands sliding from his chest up to his shoulders, gripping the solid muscle there. I pull him closer, wanting to erase the space between us, wanting to crawl inside his skin. We are lost in the darkness, in the storm, in each other. There is no past, no future. There is only now, only the feel of his mouth on mine, the strength of his hands holding me, the steady, thundering beat of his heart against my palm. This is not a fleeting moment of curiosity. This is a homecoming, a collision of 2 solitary souls who had been orbiting each other in the dark, finally crashing together. He breaks the kiss, but he doesn't move away. He rests his forehead against mine, his breathing ragged as my own. We stay like that for a long moment, our joined hands a tight, unbreakable link between us. The only sounds are our harsh breaths and the relentless, soothing drumming of the rain on the roof. Leo, he whispers, his voice thick with emotion. Mason, I breathe back, the name a talisman on my tongue. He pulls back just enough to look at me. In the flickering candlelight, I can see the raw emotion in his eyes. The mask is gone. Completely. I am seeing the real him, and he is seeing the real me. There are no more roles. No more bartender and customer. Just two men, in a dark room, in the middle of a storm. I've wanted to do that, he says, his voice raspy, for a very long time. The confession hangs in the air, a beautiful, fragile thing. A very long time. It wasn't just me. It wasn't just in my head. He felt it too. The pull, the tension, the unspoken current that flowed between us every single night. A laugh escapes me, a sound of pure, unadulterated joy and disbelief. You have a terrible way of showing it. I say, the words coming out on a shaky exhale. A genuine smile breaks across his face, and it transforms him. The severe lines of his face soften, the crinkles around his eyes deepen. He is devastatingly handsome. I know, he says, his thumb stroking my jawline. I'm not good at this. At what? I ask, my voice barely a whisper. This, he says, his gaze dropping to my lips again. At wanting something. At showing it. He pauses, his expression turning serious again. I didn't want to scare you off. Or misread everything. You didn't misread anything, I assure him, my voice gaining strength. Not a single thing. His smile returns, softer this time. Good, he says. That's good to know. He leans in and kisses me again. This kiss is different. It's slow, deep, and full of a certainty that wasn't there before. It's a kiss of reassurance, of confirmation. It says, this is real. We are real. I melt into it. All my years of loneliness and longing and quiet desperation dissolving in the warmth of his mouth. When we finally pull apart, the world slowly starts to come back into focus. The rain is still falling, a steady, rhythmic drumming that feels like the world's heartbeat. The candles are still burning, their small flames a beacon in the cozy darkness. Nothing has changed, and yet, everything has. The exhaustion hits me then, a deep, bone-weary fatigue that is more emotional than physical. The adrenaline of the last hour fades, leaving behind a quiet, trembling calm. Mason seems to feel it too. He lets out a long, slow breath, his shoulders slumping slightly. There's a couch in the back office, he says, his voice low and gentle. It's old, but it's comfortable. We should probably get some rest. The offer is simple, practical, but underneath, it's so much more. It's an offer to spend the night, to not in this moment, to let it stretch out until the morning. I nod, not trusting my voice. He stands up, pulling me gently to my feet. Our hands are still clasped together. He keeps them joined as he leads me from the booth. He picks up one of the candles, and we walk together through the darkened bar, our shadows long and intertwined on the walls. He leads me behind the bar, through a door I've never seen open, and into a small, cluttered office. It's exactly as I would have imagined it. A large, battered wooden desk covered in stacks of paper, a filing cabinet, a couple of mismatched chairs, and against one wall, a worn, dark green leather couch. It looks ancient, the leather cracked and softened with age. He sets the candle down on the desk and turns to me. The space is small, intimate. He doesn't let go of my hand. It's not much, he says, a hint of apology in his tone. It's perfect, I say, and I mean it. We stand there for a moment, just looking at each other in the soft, flickering light. The air is thick with the possibility of what comes next. My heart is beating a slow, steady rhythm now. The frantic panic is gone, replaced by a deep, resonant hum of contentment. He raises my hand to his lips and presses a soft kiss to my knuckles. The gesture is so unexpectedly tender, so chivalrous, that it makes my knees feel weak. Get some sleep, Leo, he says softly. He gestures to the couch. I sit down, the old leather sighing under my weight. He watches me, a soft, unreadable expression on his face. I think he's going to leave, to take one of the office chairs, to give me space. But he doesn't. He blows out the candle, plunging the small room into almost complete darkness. I hear him move, and then I feel the couch dip beside me. He sits down, close, but not touching. I can feel the heat of his body, a comforting, solid presence in the dark. I hear him shifting, settling in. And then, a moment later, I feel his hand find mine again in the darkness. He laces his fingers through mine, his grip firm and reassuring. He doesn't say anything else. He doesn't need to. And in the quiet darkness of the back office of a bar, with a storm raging outside and a man I've loved in secret holding my hand, I close my eyes and, for the first time in a very long time, I don't feel alone. I drifted in and out of a light, dreamless sleep, anchored to consciousness by the steady weight of Mason's hand in mine. Every time I surfaced, my first thought was a disbelieving, is this real? And every time, the solid, warm presence beside me, the faint sound of his slow, deep breathing, was the answer. Yes, this is real. At some point in the deep, quiet hours of the night, I must have shifted, turning towards him in my sleep. I woke to find my head resting on his shoulder, his arm now wrapped around me, holding me close against his side. My hand was resting on his chest, right over his heart. I could feel its slow, steady thump against my palm. The darkness was starting to fade, replaced by the soft, gray light of pre-dawn filtering through a small, grimy window high on the office wall. I lay there, perfectly still, afraid to move and break the spell. I listened to the sound of his breathing, memorizing its rhythm. I breathed in his scent, the comforting smell of soap and cotton and him. This level of intimacy was so foreign to me, so new, that it was almost overwhelming. To be held like this, with such casual, unconscious tenderness, it was everything I had ever secretly yearned for. But with the morning light came the inevitable return of my anxious, overthinking brain. The night had been a bubble, a magical, candlelit space outside of time. But the sun would rise, the storm would pass, and the real world would come rushing back in. What would happen then? A cold knot of fear began to form in my stomach. What if last night was just a product of the storm? A moment of shared loneliness and heightened emotion in the dark? What if, in the cold light of day, he would regret it? The thought was a physical pain, a sharp, twisting pang in my chest. He was the stoic, self-contained bartender. I was the quiet, lonely writer. Maybe our worlds were never meant to truly intersect. Maybe he would wake up, pull away, and the professional distance would snap back into place, more impenetrable than ever. I would have to see him behind the bar again, and we would both have to pretend that this night of impossible tenderness had never happened. The thought was unbearable. I must have tensed, because he stirred beside me. He made a low, sleepy sound in the back of his throat, and his arm tightened around me, pulling me even closer. "Morning," he murmured, his voice thick and gravelly with sleep. It vibrated through his chest, and I felt it under my hand. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it, the moment of truth. I held my breath, waiting for him to realize where we were, who he was holding, waiting for the inevitable awkwardness, the polite but firm withdrawal. But it didn't come. He just held me, his breathing evening out again as if he might drift back to sleep. After a long moment of silence, I dared to speak. "Morning," I whispered, my voice barely audible. He shifted, propping himself up on one elbow to look down at me. The gray light was just bright enough for me to see his face. His hair was a mess, falling over his forehead. His eyes were soft with sleep. He looked younger, more vulnerable than I had ever seen him. He looked at me, his gaze searching my face. I tried to keep my expression neutral, to hide the frantic anxiety churning inside me. I was terrified of what I might see in his eyes. Regret, pity, discomfort. But all I saw was a quiet, sleepy sort of wonder. He raised his free hand and gently brushed a stray piece of hair off my forehead. His fingers were warm against my skin. The gesture was so simple, so intimate, it made my throat ache. "You're still here," he said, his voice a low rumble. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of pleased surprise. "You locked the door," I reminded him, trying for a bit of levity to cover my shaking insides. I didn't have much of a choice. A slow smile spread across his face. "Right," he said. "I forgot about that." We lay there in silence for another moment, just looking at each other. The knot of fear in my stomach began to loosen, ever so slightly. He wasn't pulling away. He wasn't creating distance. He was looking at me like he was happy I was here. "How did you sleep?" he asked, his thumb now stroking my temple in a slow, hypnotic rhythm. Better than I have in a long time, I admitted, the truth slipping out before I could stop it. His smile softened. Me too, he confessed. The confession settled between us, a quiet, profound thing. The morning light was growing stronger, chasing the last of the shadows from the corners of the small office. The sounds of the city were starting to filter in, the distant rumble of a garbage truck, the chirp of a bird. The world was waking up. Our bubble was about to burst. I needed to know. I couldn't spend the rest of my life wondering. Mason, I started, my voice wavering slightly. About last night. He stilled, his thumb ceasing its gentle motion. His expression grew serious. Yeah. I struggled for the words, my courage failing me. How could I ask? How could I voice my deepest fear? Do you regret it? As if he could read my mind. His expression softened with understanding. He leaned down and pressed a soft, gentle kiss to my forehead. It wasn't a passionate kiss. It was a kiss of reassurance, of comfort. Leo, he said, his voice firm but gentle as he pulled back. I have wanted to kiss you since the first night you walked into this bar 2 years ago. I have spent 730 nights watching you sit in that corner booth, trying to work up the nerve to say something more than same again. Last night was not a mistake. It wasn't about the storm. The only thing I regret is that I waited so long. Every word he spoke was a balm on my raw, anxious soul. 2 years. He had felt it for 2 years. All that time I had spent thinking I was invisible, that my feelings were a one-sided, pathetic secret. He had been feeling it too. The relief was so immense, so overwhelming, that my eyes filled with tears. I blinked them back, mortified. He saw them anyway. Hey, he said softly, his thumb gently wiping away a tear that had escaped. What's this? I let out a shaky laugh. I thought I was the only one. His expression was a mixture of tenderness and a deep, resonant sadness. No, he said, his voice rough with emotion. You were never the only one. He leaned in and kissed me again, and this kiss was a promise. It was slow and deep and full of all the words we hadn't been able to say for 2 long years. It was a kiss that said, I see you. I choose you. You are not alone. When we broke apart, the sun was streaming through the small window, filling the dusty office with golden light. The morning had truly arrived. He sat up, stretching his arms over his head. The movement pulled his t-shirt taut across his broad chest. I watched him, my heart full to bursting. I need coffee, he announced, swinging his legs over the side of the couch. A lot of it. And I'm guessing you do too. He stood up and looked down at me, a playful glint in his eye. Don't go anywhere. The door's still locked, I reminded him. He grinned, a full, genuine grin that lit up his entire face. Good point, he said, and then he was gone, disappearing through the office door and back into the bar. I lay on the couch for a few minutes, listening to the sounds of him moving around. The clink of a coffee mug, the rush of water in a sink, the familiar, comforting sounds of someone starting their day. I looked around the small, cluttered office, at the stacks of paper, the worn-out furniture. This was his space, his private world that he had let me into. A wave of something warm and unfamiliar washed over me. It wasn't just relief. It was hope. A bright, terrifying, beautiful hope for the future. I finally pushed myself up and followed him out into the bar. The room looked completely different in the morning light. Sunlight streamed through the large front windows, illuminating motes of dust dancing in the air. The candle stubs from the night before looked small and insignificant in the daylight. The place looked normal, just a bar in the morning. Mason was behind the bar, but he wasn't working. He was making coffee with a small machine he had tucked away under the counter. He had 2 mugs out. He looked up as I approached, and his smile was easy and natural. Cream? Sugar? He asked. Just black, I said, sliding onto one of the bar stools. It felt strange to be sitting here, on this side of the bar, in the bright light of day. He poured the coffee and slid a mug across the polished wood towards me. Our fingers brushed, and this time, I didn't pull away. I let the contact linger, a small, quiet affirmation of the night we had shared. We drank our coffee in a comfortable silence, the silence of 2 people who no longer needed to fill the space with words. The fear and awkwardness of the morning had completely dissipated, leaving behind a quiet intimacy that felt more real and solid than anything I had ever known. But a new question began to surface in my mind. A practical one. What now? What were we? Were we two people who had shared a night? Or were we something more? The uncertainty was a low hum of anxiety beneath the surface of my newfound happiness. As if sensing my thoughts again, Mason put his mug down and turned to face me, leaning his back against the counter. He looked at me, his expression serious. "So," he said, his voice calm and level. "This is probably the part where things get complicated." My heart sank a little. "Complicated how?" "Well," he said, ticking the points off on his fingers. "I'm your bartender. You're my customer. This place, it's our usual dynamic. And now," he trailed off, gesturing to the space between us. "This is new." He was right. How could I go back to sitting in my corner booth, watching him from afar, now that I knew what it felt like to be in his arms? How could we go back to being bartender and customer? "I don't want to mess this up, Leo," he said, his voice earnest. "Whatever this is, I don't want to make you uncomfortable. I don't want you to stop coming here." The thought that he was worried about my comfort, that he was already thinking about how to navigate this, was so considerate it made my chest ache. "I don't want to stop coming here," I said honestly. "But I don't think I can go back to just being the quiet guy in the corner." He nodded, a look of relief on his face. "Good. Me neither." He was quiet for a moment, his gaze distant as he thought. Then, he pushed off the counter and walked towards the end of the bar. He disappeared for a moment into the back office and returned with a small, single key on a simple metal ring. He walked back to me and held it out, laying it on the bar between us. It was a simple, brass key, old and worn. I looked at it, then up at him, confused. "What's this?" "It's not for the bar," he said, his voice low and steady. He tapped the ceiling with his finger. "I live upstairs. There's a separate entrance around the back." I stared at the key, my mind struggling to comprehend the magnitude of what he was offering. A key to his home, to his private space. It was a key to a world beyond the bar, a world that was just his. And he was offering it to me. It was an offer of a future, an offer of a conscious choice, to move beyond the roles we had played for so long and to start something new, something real. "Mason," I whispered, overwhelmed. "No pressure," he said quickly, though his eyes were pleading. "Just so you know, you don't have to be the guy in the corner anymore. You can be the guy upstairs, if you want." I looked from the key, a small piece of metal that represented so much, to his face, to his hopeful, vulnerable, beautiful face. And for the first time in my life, the path forward was not shrouded in fog and fear. It was clear. It was bright. I reached out, and my fingers closed around the key. Its metal was cool against my skin. I said, my voice thick with an emotion so powerful it almost stole my breath. "I really, really want." A slow, brilliant smile spread across his face, a smile of pure, unadulterated relief and joy. He reached across the bar and took my hand, his fingers lacing with mine around the key. The morning light streamed through the window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. The bar was quiet, peaceful, and in that moment, holding the key to a future I had never dared to dream of, I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that I had finally, truly, come home.